The pristine halls of Skthar Stellar Command erupted into chaos as emergency lights bathed the crystalline architecture in pulsing waves of purple. Senior Commander Vextil's appendages trembled as multiple holographic screens materialized around their command pod, each displaying the same alarming data. Confirmation required. The station's AI chimed in its melodious tone. Unknown vessel detected at coordinates 227 Mark 384. Hull configuration matches historical records. Species identification. Human. The word rippled through the command center like an electric shock. Junior officers froze at their posts, their iridescent scales shifting to pale blue in collective anxiety. Vextil had trained for many scenarios, but nothing truly prepared one for this moment. Display historical database entries, Vextil ordered, their voice steady despite the growing unease. The main screen filled with ancient records, documented encounters, and warnings passed down through generations of spacefaring species. The entries scrolled past. Humans survive in corrosive dihydrogen monoxide environments. Specimens observed deliberately ingesting capsaicin compounds for pleasure. Warning: known to continue functioning after sustaining critical damage to primary systems. Vextil's second-in-command, strategic analyst Zinra, pulled up enhanced scans of the approaching vessel. Assessment suggests a research configuration, but that could be deception. Humans are known for their strategic misdirection. The ship was small by Skthar standards, barely a quarter the size of their defensive platforms. Its hull bore markings in the human script, and its energy emissions appeared minimal. Yet every officer in the room knew that appearances meant little when dealing with humans. Begin civilian evacuation protocols for all systems within 3 light years, Vextil commanded. Redirect all non-essential power to defensive shields. Alert the High Council immediately. As the orders were carried out, Vextil reviewed more historical footage. There were recordings of humans casually walking through what should have been lethal temperatures, consuming substances that would dissolve Skthar digestive systems, and most terrifyingly, continuing their daily activities despite minimal solar radiation exposure. The High Council's response was swift. Within moments, the chamber filled with the projected images of the 12 most senior Skthar leaders, their scales shifting in patterns that reflected their agitation. The humans have never ventured this far into the outer rim, Council Elder Mextor stated, their patterns showing deep concern. Their presence cannot be coincidence. Another counselor, Yixval, brought up an ancient recording. Remember the testament of the Proxima observers. Humans defeated a stellar predator by hurling frozen water at relativistic speeds. Their ingenuity makes them unpredictable. The ship continued its approach, maintaining a steady course that would bring it into direct contact with the Skthar border in approximately 6 hours. Every attempt to scan its interior was met with inconclusive results, which only heightened the tension. They appear to be transmitting something, a communications officer announced, their scales rippling with nervous patterns. Analysis, Vextil demanded. It appears to be a greeting. The translation matrix suggests they are requesting peaceful contact. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the stories of human diplomatic encounters, how they would bare their teeth in what they claimed was a friendly gesture, how they would extend their strike limbs in complex ritual challenges they called handshakes. Deploy the 4th Defense Fleet, Council Elder Mextor commanded. Begin emergency preparations across all core worlds. If the humans have finally decided to expand into our space, we must be ready. As the orders echoed through subspace channels, Vextil couldn't help but notice that the human vessel made no aggressive moves. It maintained its course, continuing to broadcast its messages of peaceful intent. Perhaps, Zinra suggested quietly, we should attempt to understand why they're here before. A sudden alert cut through the chamber. The human vessel had adjusted its course slightly, a maneuver that sent 3 nearby patrol ships into emergency evasive action. All stations, battle alert, Vextil announced, watching as the situation they had dreaded for generations began to unfold. The humans have arrived. May the stellar ancestors preserve us all. Captain Sarah Chen massaged her temples as she stared at the main view screen of the U.S. Magellan, her small research vessel, designed for scientific missions and cultural studies, had somehow managed to trigger what appeared to be a sector-wide panic among the Scar. Dr. Wong, please tell me you've made progress with the translations. She called out to her cultural expert, who was buried beneath layers of holographic data streams. Marcus Wong looked up from his workstation, his expression a mixture of amusement and bewilderment. Captain, you're not going to believe this. According to their emergency broadcasts, they think we're some kind of apex predator species. They're evacuating civilian populations in 3 neighboring systems. Lieutenant Rivera, the communications officer, tried suppressing a laugh but failed. Ma'am, they just classified my request for cultural exchange as a psychological warfare tactic. Should I try sending it again? Hold off on that, Lieutenant. Sarah stood up and walked to the main observation window. The distant stars were partially obscured by the impressive array of Scathar defensive platforms that had materialized in their path. Let's review what we know. We're here on a peaceful research mission, following all first contact protocols, and somehow we've terrified an entire civilization. Dr. Park, the ship's chief scientist, pulled up a holographic display of their approach vector. Look at this, Captain. Every minor course correction we make sends their patrol ships into elaborate evasive patterns. It's almost as if they expect us to, I don't know, shoot lasers from our eyes or something. Actually, Marcus chimed in, still scrolling through translations, they think we might be able to do something worse. There's a reference here to humans being able to manipulate molecular bonds through oral chemistry. I think they're talking about us eating spicy food. The bridge crew shared a collective moment of disbelief. The Magellan's mission had been straightforward. Establish first contact with the Scathar, learn about their culture, and hopefully set up diplomatic relations. Nobody had expected their routine approach to cause an interstellar incident. New contact, Lieutenant Kim announced from Tactical. They're launching what appears to be some kind of probe toward us. Very slow, non-aggressive approach vector. The probe, a crystalline structure that sparkled in the starlight, stopped at what the Scathar presumably considered a safe distance. It projected a series of complex mathematical equations into space. It's an intelligence test, Dr. Park realized, quickly running the calculations. They're trying to determine our cognitive capabilities. Should I respond? Sarah nodded. Send them the solutions, but Dr. Park, maybe don't solve them too quickly. We don't want to frighten them more than we already have. As they waited for a response, the ship's cat, Professor Whiskers, sauntered onto the bridge. Several crew members noticed the Scathar sensors immediately focusing on the small creature, followed by another burst of panicked communications. They think Professor Whiskers is some kind of bioengineered surveillance organism, Marcus reported, trying to keep his voice professional despite the absurdity. There's a note here about humans having the ability to bend lesser predators to their will. Sarah sat back in her captain's chair, considering their options. All right, let's try something different. Dr. Wong, prepare a comprehensive cultural package. Include basic information about Earth, but focus on our artistic achievements, scientific cooperation, and peaceful exploration missions. Lieutenant Rivera transmitted on all frequencies. The response was not quite what they expected. The Scathar defensive platforms immediately raised their shields, apparently interpreting the data burst as some kind of sophisticated attack. Captain, Marcus called out, his voice more serious now. I think I understand part of the problem. The Scathar have a fundamentally different approach to space exploration. They believe any species capable of interstellar travel must be inherently aggressive, given the resources and determination required. Our peaceful approach doesn't fit their worldview, so they're assuming it must be a trick. Sarah stood again, straightening her uniform. Then our mission just got more interesting. We're not just here to study their culture, we need to help them understand ours. Lieutenant Rivera, open a channel. Let's try this again. But this time, we'll take it slow. Very slow. Professor Whiskers chose that moment to start grooming himself, causing another spike in Skthar's sensor activity and a fresh round of emergency broadcasts about human bioweapon capabilities. Lieutenant Emma Rivera's eyes widened as she decoded another burst of Skthar transmissions. The ship's translation matrix hummed softly as it processed the alien language, revealing increasingly entertaining misunderstandings about human nature. "Captain, you need to hear this," she called out, struggling to maintain her professional composure. "They're broadcasting educational programs about humans across their networks. According to their experts, we're a species that deliberately exposes ourselves to radiation for aesthetic purposes. They're talking about sunbathing," Dr. Wong realized, leaning over to examine the translations. "And look here, they've documented humans performing ritual endurance trials in dedicated chambers. That's just people going to the gym." The bridge crew gathered around the main display as more translations poured in. The Skthar media was working overtime, producing special reports and emergency bulletins about the approaching human vessel. Each new piece of information seemed to add another layer to their mysterious reputation. "Here's my favorite," Lieutenant Kim announced, pulling up a particularly dramatic broadcast. "Humans have mastered cellular regeneration through the consumption of enriched plant and fungal matter. They're talking about pizza, Captain. They think pizza is some kind of medical technology." Sarah Chen watched the alien broadcasts with a mixture of amusement and concern. The Skthar had compiled an extensive database of human behaviors, but their interpretations were fascinatingly off-target. Their scientific illustrations showed humans as beings of extraordinary capability, able to withstand extreme conditions that would barely make an Earth weather report. "Look at this educational segment," Dr. Park pointed out. "They're warning their children about human resilience. Apparently, we're known for continuing conscious operation despite extended periods without neural reset. I think they mean we pull all-nighters." The broadcasts continued, each more elaborate than the last. The Skthar had created detailed animations showing humans performing what they considered extraordinary feats: drinking hot coffee, eating ice cream, walking in the rain, and sleeping in complete darkness. "They've got a whole section about our battle capabilities," Rivera reported. "They think spacesuits are some kind of advanced combat armor. And they're absolutely terrified of our ability to use tools. There's a whole emergency protocol about what to do if a human picks up an object." Dr. Wong was frantically taking notes, his anthropological expertise finally finding its purpose. "This is fascinating. They've developed an entire mythology around us. Look at these cultural warnings. They think our social gatherings are strategic planning sessions. Our music is a form of psychic conditioning, and our dancing is some kind of combat training." The ship's cat chose that moment to jump onto a console, triggering another wave of sensor scans from the nearby Skthar vessels. The resulting broadcast speculated about the hierarchical relationship between humans and their engineered surveillance creatures. "Captain," Rivera called out suddenly, her voice more serious. "They're beginning to broadcast what appears to be historical records. These are accounts from other species who claim to have encountered humans before." The crew fell silent as the translations appeared on screen. The accounts, while heavily embellished, contained kernels of truth about human history, exploration, and scientific advancement. Each story had been transformed into a cautionary tale about human ingenuity and determination. "They're not entirely wrong," Sarah mused, reading through the accounts. "We did survive all those things they're talking about. We did overcome environmental challenges, develop technology, and explore space. They're just seeing it through a very different lens." Dr. Wong nodded thoughtfully. The Skthar seemed to have a binary view of species capabilities. In their understanding, any species that can achieve what we have must be either incredibly dangerous or impossibly advanced. They can't quite grasp that we're just human. "Well," Sarah said, straightening in her chair as another wave of dramatic broadcasts filled their screens, "I suppose our mission has evolved. We're not just here to study their culture. We need to help them understand that being human isn't as terrifying as they think." Professor Whiskers meowed in agreement, prompting a new emergency bulletin about human-controlled entities displaying vocal command capabilities. The first visual communication with the Skthar coincided perfectly with Captain Sarah Chen's morning tea ritual. As the connection established, displaying the crystalline command center of the alien vessel, she automatically reached for her steaming cup of Earl Grey. The reaction was instantaneous. The Skthar observers recoiled in their translucent pods, their iridescent scales flickering in patterns that the translation matrix identified as extreme alarm. Emergency signals pulsed across their ship as Sarah took her first step. The human leader is consuming liquid at temperatures exceeding biological safety parameters. The Skthar announcement echoed through both ships' communication systems. Repeat. Confirmed demonstration of thermal immunity. Dr. Wong quickly raised his hands in what he hoped was a calming gesture. No, you misunderstand. This is just tea, a traditional Earth beverage." His enthusiastic explanation only seemed to make matters worse. The Skithar's sensory appendages waved in agitation as they documented what they called aggressive knowledge distribution tactics. "Captain," Lieutenant Rivera whispered, "their cultural database is categorizing Dr. Wong's behavior as intellectual dominance display. They think he's trying to overwhelm them with information as some kind of power move." Sarah carefully set down her teacup, noting how the Skthar tracking systems followed her every movement. "Perhaps we should try a different approach. Dr. Park, could you share some of our preliminary research findings? Something simple and non-threatening." Dr. James Park nodded and began displaying basic astronomical data they collected. His genuine excitement about the scientific discoveries shone through as he explained their observations of nearby star systems. Alert! The Skthar sensors blazed. The human scientist exhibits signs of emotional investment in stellar phenomena, possible indication of solar manipulation capabilities. The situation grew more complicated when Professor Whiskers, apparently deciding this was the perfect moment for attention, leaped onto the conference table. The Skthar observation team erupted into fresh panic. Confirmed sighting of human-controlled predator entity. Security protocols inadequate for current threat level. Lieutenant Kim couldn't help but laugh as the ship's cat began casually grooming itself in full view of the alien observers. They're now updating their database to include humans command ferocious beasts with casual gestures. Perhaps, Sarah suggested carefully, we could give them a tour of our ship. Show them that we're not as frightening as they think. The Skthar command pod rippled with colors that the translation matrix struggled to interpret. After several moments, they agreed to observe a recorded tour, insisting that direct physical proximity to humans exceeded their current safety protocols. Dr. Wong led the virtual tour, carefully explaining each area of the ship. However, every attempt at demystifying human life seemed to add new layers to their fearsome reputation. The ship's gym became a combat preparation chamber. The kitchen was labeled a chemical processing laboratory. The crew's movie night was documented as tactical simulation training. They're particularly concerned about the coffee maker, Rivera reported, monitoring the Skthar communications. They've classified it as a psychoactive substance synthesizer and are warning about our ability to enhance our cognitive functions through chemical means. Sarah watched as their simple attempts at friendship transformed into unintentional demonstrations of human capabilities. Every ordinary action was being recorded, analyzed, and added to the growing mythology about their species. Look at their scientific readings, Dr. Park noted with fascination. They're measuring everything. Our body temperature, our casual resistance to the ship's artificial gravity, even our ability to process artificial lighting. Everything we consider normal is extraordinary to them. Professor Whiskers chose that moment to roll over and expose his belly, a gesture that the Skthar interpreted as some kind of advanced defensive posture. Their sensors went into overdrive trying to analyze this new tactical position. Well, Sarah sighed, watching as their attempts at diplomacy continued to backfire in increasingly amusing ways. At least they're starting to communicate with us, even if they're doing it from what they consider a safe distance. That's progress, right? The Scathar observers continued their detailed documentation, their reports now including a new category: human diplomatic techniques. Disarming behavior possibly designed to lower defensive preparations. The main screen of the U.S. Magellan displayed multiple Scathar entertainment channels, each featuring the same subject: them. Lieutenant Rivera had discovered that their every movement was being broadcast across Scathar space as a reality danger program, titled Close Encounters, Human Studies. Captain, Rivera called out, monitoring the broadcasts. We've just made prime time across 12 star systems. They're running special features on our mysterious rituals. The morning coffee run is apparently this week's most watched segment. Sarah Chen watched as highly dramatized footage showed crew members performing mundane tasks, each overlaid with ominous commentary and expert analysis. A simple maintenance check had been transformed into advanced technology manipulation. Extreme risk scenario. They'd given Professor Whiskers his own spin-off show, Dr. Wong reported, unable to contain his amusement. It's called The Human's Beast, Understanding Earth's Elite Predators. They're fascinated by his ability to sleep for 18 hours while maintaining combat readiness. The ship's cat, unaware of his interstellar fame, continued his nap in a patch of starlight, occasionally twitching his tail. Each movement sparked new theories from Scathar behavioral experts about feline combat techniques. Look at these viewer numbers, Lieutenant Kim marveled, scanning the data. Our last sensor diagnostic is trending across their social networks. They think we were performing some kind of advanced technological ritual. The comments section is full of theories about human engineering capabilities. Dr. Park's routine equipment calibration had somehow become mysterious energy manipulation techniques, complete with slow-motion replays and expert panels discussing the implications of human tool use. Even the ship's recycling system had its own documentary special, Technological Terrors, Human Resource Management. Captain, Dr. Wong suggested, maybe we can use this attention to our advantage. If they're going to watch everything we do, why not show them something worth seeing? Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Agreed. Let's give them a real look at human nature. Lieutenant Rivera, make sure our broadcasts are clear and accessible. Dr. Wong, prepare some educational materials about Earth's history of peaceful exploration. The crew began their impromptu public relations campaign. Dr. Park organized a basic science demonstration, showing how humans use technology to understand the universe rather than conquer it. The Scathar audience watched in fascination as he explained simple physics concepts, though they interpreted his enthusiasm as aggressive knowledge mastery. They're particularly intrigued by our music, Rivera noted, monitoring the reactions to their cultural broadcast. Though they're divided on whether Earth songs are meant for communication or atmospheric manipulation. The crew's regular movie night became an unexpected hit. The Scathar audiences were captivated by the concept of storytelling through visual media, though they remained convinced that science fiction films were actually historical documents. According to their analysts, Kim reported, trying not to laugh, Star Wars is a heavily censored account of human military history. They're particularly concerned about our apparent mastery of laser sword technology. Even the ship's routine maintenance proved enlightening. The Scathar watched in amazement as crew members worked together, their coordination and problem-solving abilities adding new chapters to their growing legend. They've started a debate about human social structures, Dr. Wong observed, reviewing the latest broadcasts. Our crew dynamics don't match their hierarchical expectations. They can't quite grasp the concept of cooperative leadership. Professor Whiskers stretched and walked across the bridge, causing an immediate spike in viewer engagement. The cat's casual interaction with the crew had spawned countless theories about human-animal communication protocols. Well, Sarah remarked, watching their ordinary day transform into extraordinary entertainment, If we're going to be stars, we might as well use our platform wisely. Dr. Wong, let's prepare a series of cultural exchange presentations. Show them that human innovation comes from curiosity, not conquest. The Scathar networks immediately began promoting the upcoming human broadcasts as unprecedented insights into Earth's elite. Their promotional materials featured dramatic footage of crew members sharing meals, maintaining equipment, and occasionally petting the ship's cat, all set to appropriately intense background music. At least they're watching, Sarah mused. That's the first step toward understanding. The solar storm warning came without fanfare, a simple alert on the Magellan's sensor display. Dr. Park was the first to notice the readings, his eyes widening as he analyzed the data. Captain, massive coronal ejection detected from the nearby binary system, he reported, fingers flying over his console. The radiation wave will hit this sector in approximately 43 minutes. Sarah Chen quickly assessed the tactical display, noting the positions of nearby vessels. The Magellan shields could easily handle the storm, but something else caught her attention. A small Scathar research station directly in the path of the incoming wave. Lieutenant Rivera, what's the status of that station? She asked, already knowing they couldn't simply watch what might happen. Minimal shielding, Captain. Their design suggests it's an atmospheric research facility. Rivera paused, rechecking her readings. They don't appear to have radiation protection strong enough for this magnitude of storm. The bridge crew watched as the Scathar emergency channels erupted with activity. The station's evacuation protocols were initiating, but their calculations showed the nearest rescue vessel wouldn't arrive in time. Captain, Dr. Wong spoke up, monitoring the Scathar broadcasts. They're streaming this live across their networks. Millions are watching the station's evacuation attempts. Sarah stood from her chair, decision made. Lieutenant Kim, plot an intercept course. Dr. Park, begin shield modulation calculations. We're not going to sit here and watch those researchers get hurt. The moment the Magellan changed course, the Scathar broadcasts shifted to emergency alerts about human attack patterns. Their defensive platforms tracked the ship's movement, interpreting their rescue attempt as some kind of aggressive maneuver. They're warning the station about our approach, Rivera reported. The researchers are being told to prepare for extreme human interaction protocols. Open a channel, Sarah ordered. All frequencies. The communication screen filled with the image of the station's lead researcher, their scales shifting in patterns of obvious distress. This is Captain Chen of the U.S. Magellan. We've detected the incoming solar storm, and we're moving to assist. Your current shielding won't withstand the radiation. The Scathar researcher's translator processed her words, leading to more agitated color patterns. Human vessel, we acknowledge your superior tactical position. We submit to your. We're not attacking you. Sarah interrupted firmly. We're trying to help. Dr. Park, show them the storm data. As the scientific readings appeared on their shared screen, the Magellan continued its approach. The Scathar watched in confusion as the human vessel positioned itself between the station and the incoming storm. Dr. Park, extend our shields. Lieutenant Kim, maintain position. Lieutenant Rivera, keep that channel open. They need to understand what we're doing. The Magellan's advanced shields hummed to life, creating a protective bubble that encompassed both vessels. The Scathar researchers watched in amazement as their instruments confirmed the human ship was actually protecting them. When the storm hit, the shields flared brilliantly against the onslaught of radiation. Dr. Park worked steadily at his station, making constant adjustments to maintain optimal protection. Scathar Station. Sarah broadcast. Please confirm your status. There was a long pause before the response came. We are undamaged. Your shields protected us from harm, but why? Because you needed help, Sarah replied simply. That's what humans do. The storm passed after 27 intense minutes, leaving both vessels unscathed. The Scathar networks, which had been broadcasting the entire event, exploded with new discussions about human behavior. They're calling it the Shield Incident, Dr. Wong reported, monitoring the broadcasts. Their experts are trying to understand why a supposedly dangerous species would risk their own safety to protect others. As the Magellan prepared to return to its original position, the Scathar station transmitted one final message. Human vessel, we have many questions about your actions today. Would you be willing to discuss them with us? Sarah smiled, recognizing the first real breakthrough in their mission. We'd be honored. And perhaps while we talk, we can show you that not everything unknown needs to be feared. The Scathar networks immediately began promoting the upcoming discussion as first peaceful contact with human entities, understanding the shield protectors. Professor Whiskers, watching from his perch near the science station, purred contentedly as another chapter was added to the legend of humanity. This time, one of compassion rather than fear. After the success of the Shield incident, the Magellan's observation lounge transformed into an impromptu cultural exchange center. The Scathar researchers, still maintaining what they considered a safe distance via holographic projections, had begun asking questions about human civilization with cautious curiosity. Let me understand correctly, the lead Scathar scientist, Vexnil, asked while watching Dr. Park enjoy his lunch. You willingly subject your food to controlled thermal reactions before consumption. We call it cooking, Dr. Park explained, cutting into his grilled cheese sandwich. It's both a science and an art form on Earth. Different cultures have developed thousands of unique preparation methods. The Scathar observers documented this with fascination, their scales shifting in patterns of academic interest rather than their usual terror. Their previous assumption that humans consumed thermally enhanced sustenance as a show of power was slowly giving way to understanding. Dr. Wong, would you share some Earth music with our guests? Sarah suggested, noting how the Scathar had relaxed somewhat during their cultural discussions. The soft strains of classical music filled the lounge. The Scathar researchers swayed unconsciously, their crystalline forms resonating with the frequencies. One of them, a junior scientist, actually produced a harmonious accompaniment through their natural bioluminescence. This is not a warfare rhythm, the junior scientist observed with surprise. It creates pleasant neural patterns. How curious. Lieutenant Rivera had been organizing translation matrices for various Earth languages, showing how humans communicated across different regions. The Scathar were particularly intrigued by the concept of poetry. You manipulate sound patterns for aesthetic purposes, not just tactical advantages. Vexnil asked, their color patterns showing deep contemplation. Perhaps we have misinterpreted many things about your species. Professor Whiskers chose that moment to demonstrate another aspect of human culture by jumping onto Dr. Wong's lap for attention. The Scathar scientists, now more curious than fearful, watched the interaction closely. The small predator shows affection, one researcher noted, and the human responds with gentle physical contact. This suggests a complex social bond rather than a master-servant relationship. Dr. Park pulled up holographic displays of Earth's scientific achievements, carefully explaining how human curiosity drove exploration rather than conquest. The Scathar were fascinated by the concept of scientific collaboration. Your species works together to understand the universe, Vexnil observed. This explains how you achieved so much without developing the aggressive traits we expected from an advanced civilization. Sarah shared stories of Earth's space exploration history, emphasizing the international cooperation that made it possible. The Scathar learned about the International Space Station, the Mars colonies, and the deep space research initiatives that eventually led to ships like the Magellan. Each discovery taught us how much more there was to learn, Sarah explained. That's why we're out here, not to conquer, but to understand. Lieutenant Kim demonstrated human art forms, from painting to digital creation. The Scathar were particularly moved by landscapes, having never considered capturing visual beauty for its own sake. Your species creates without practical purpose, a Scathar artist-scientist marveled. You make things simply because they bring joy. This is enlightening. As the days passed, the cultural exchange deepened. The Scathar began sharing their own art, music, and scientific discoveries. They showed how their crystalline technology developed from their understanding of natural harmonics and how their society valued knowledge preservation above all else. Perhaps, Vexnil suggested during one session, we could establish a permanent cultural exchange program. There is clearly much we could learn from each other. The idea spread quickly through Scathar space. Their networks, which had once broadcast warnings about human dangers, now featured educational programs about Earth culture. Cooking shows became surprisingly popular, though the Scathar still couldn't quite believe humans actually ate the results. It seems, Dr. Wong noted as they watched another successful exchange session, that understanding really does begin with curiosity. Sarah nodded, watching as human and Scathar scientists excitedly discussed the possibilities of combining their different approaches to space exploration. Professor Whiskers had even gained a following among young Scathar, who now viewed Earth's companion animals as fascinating rather than frightening. The bridge of cultural differences was being built, one shared discovery at a time. The inauguration ceremony for the first human Scathar Cultural Center took place in a vast crystalline chamber, specially designed to accommodate both species comfortably. Captain Sarah Chen stood before the assembled dignitaries, still amazed at how much had changed since their first terrifying encounter. 3 months ago, we arrived as unknowns, preceded by legends of human ferocity. She began, watching as the translation crystals transformed her words into harmonious Scathar frequencies. Today, we stand together as partners in exploration and understanding. The chamber sparkled with the bioluminescent patterns of hundreds of Scathar, their scales now showing colors of celebration rather than fear. Among them, a small delegation of human scientists and diplomats watched with pride as years of misconceptions finally gave way to truth. Captain Vexnil, now the head of Scathar Human Relations, chimed in, "You have helped us understand that capability does not equate to threat. Though we must admit, your species remains remarkably impressive." Dr. Wong, reviewing the latest cultural exchange reports, couldn't help but smile. The Scathar still maintained their extensive database of human abilities, but the entries had evolved. Survives in corrosive environments, had become developed advanced water purification technology. Consumes thermal compounds was now created diverse culinary arts. They're still a bit nervous about some things, Lieutenant Rivera noted, monitoring the ongoing Scathar broadcasts. They dedicated an entire research division to understanding how humans can sleep in complete darkness. They're convinced it's some kind of advanced meditation technique. Professor Whiskers, who had become something of a cultural ambassador himself, lounged regally on a crystalline pedestal. Young Scathar scholars studied him with scientific instruments, documenting what they now called the Earth Companion Bond phenomenon. The latest educational programs are fascinating, Dr. Park reported, reviewing the content being distributed across Scathar space. They're teaching their children about human history, but with a focus on our scientific achievements and artistic expressions. The ceremony continued as both species shared their hopes for future cooperation. The Scathar presented Sarah with an honorary position in their Academy of Xenostudies, though they still insisted on conducting the ritual from what they considered a safe distance. Some habits die hard, Sarah whispered to Dr. Wong as she accepted the crystalline medallion via a carefully calibrated transport beam. The cultural center itself represented a beautiful blend of both civilizations. Crystalline architecture housed Earth art installations, while human-designed laboratories contained Scathar harmonics equipment. The library section included both traditional books and resonance crystals, each containing the accumulated knowledge of their respective species. "We've even inspired some changes in their language," Lieutenant Kim observed. "They've created new color patterns to express concepts like human friend and earth wisdom, though they still use the emergency pattern when someone sneezes." As the ceremony drew to a close, Vexnil approached Sarah with a final presentation. We have compiled a new historical document, they announced. The true story of our first contact, to replace the legends of fear with lessons of understanding. The document, displayed on massive crystalline screens, told the story of the U.S. Magellan's arrival. But now, alongside entries about human capabilities were descriptions of human compassion, creativity, and curiosity. The SHIELD incident had its own chapter, titled "The Day Protection Replaced Fear." Though Vexnil added with a harmonic pattern indicating amusement, we must admit that some of your actual abilities are still quite remarkable. Just yesterday, we observed Dr. Park drinking his coffee at temperatures that would melt our sensory appendages. The gathered humans laughed, and after a moment of translation delay, the Scathar joined in with their own crystalline chimes of mirth. It was a sound that would have been unimaginable just months ago. As the Magellan prepared for departure the next day, Sarah looked at the cultural center one last time. The facility would serve as a beacon for future human ships, a place where fear had transformed into friendship. "You know," she said to her crew, "sometimes the best legends are the ones we create together." Professor Whiskers mewed in agreement, causing several nearby Scathar to reflexively activate their sensor arrays, old habits dying hard. But now they did so with curiosity rather than terror, eager to understand rather than afraid to learn.